Namaste everyone. Since I have limited time today, I will focus on three general issues in this lecture to discuss roots of Hinduphobia. I will focus on the unfair treatment of the subject of Hinduism in the academia. I will also focus on some topics which promote partial understanding of Hinduism, leading to overall misunderstanding, which results in Hinduphobia. Uncontrolled spread of partisan understanding of Hinduism could result in dire consequences, partially understanding the subject, and finally exposing Hindus for genocidal attacks. Therefore, I have decided to focus here on the roots of Hinduphobia, the study of Hinduism and its repercussions to larger Hindu society. There are a few caveats before I go into the lecture. I would give them here. This examination does not focus on individual academics, but the general trend of partial examination of Hinduism noted in the academia. I consider it futile to attempt to consider each academic individually, since this is a systemic issue, not limited to an individual. Therefore, examining the subject area and requiring change in the manner of examination is important than focusing on certain individuals. This is not to indicate that all academic work on Hinduism is partisan. There is some good impartial work on Hinduism, but limited. Not all academic work is same, but as we noted previously, individual work cannot bring substantial change in attitudes. It has to be a systemic change, a complete revamp of attitudes. It is necessary to bring about change in the way Hinduism is studied and to remedy how Hindus are implicated unjustly. Impartial treatment of any academic subject is necessary. Education is a noble profession, important to bring the truth. Human rights include individual rights to practice any religion. Hinduism is no exception. Attempts to malign any one religion based on spurious interpretations or imaginary constructions, theoretical constructions, is criminal. I am focusing here on Western scholarship. That doesn't mean that such type of scholarship is not found in India. It is found, but most of it is an imitation of what has been written in the West. So I am focusing here on the general themes, not particular Indian or Western scholars. I will examine three aspects of the subject of Hindu studies here. First, I will examine select topics of Hinduism as studied in the academia, which exposes partisan examination of the subject. Second, I will examine how Hindus are implicated with assumptions based on these partisan interpretations, festivals, and attacks. Third, how Hindus were subjected to undue pressures to justify their faith. So these three aspects will make the presentation today. Hindu history and culture are wrought with generalizations and simplifications in addition to misnomers and misinformation. For example, how many in the general public know that the infamous Nazi symbol is nothing to do with Hindu symbol swastika, or that the Nazi symbol had never been called swastika? That is the power of misinterpretations and misrepresentations. Colonial beginnings of Hindu studies implanted suspicions of practitioners within the subject. The epics, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana are reinterpreted to reflect the invader versus indigenous dichotomy. Even though the invader versus indigenous paradigm based on the fictional theory of Aryans is disproven, these narratives still continue to dominate Hindu studies. Symbolic representations of evil, the demons are identified as Dalits, even though internal suspicions of the established practice and religions of Hinduism. Misunderstandings of Hinduism comes from these misplaced identity constructs. Though these effectively disconnect the authentic practices from public perceptions. Scholars disproving this dichotomy of invader versus indigenous perspective through disproving Aryan invasion theory are name called, or worse. For example, during one of my lectures, they began raising questions about how Holika's representation was patriarchal. But wasn't Holika a child killer? Didn't she jump into fire to kill a child? I was noting on the news the other day, a woman was trying to steal a child and she was sent to jail for 10 years just on attempt to steal a child. So how is somebody who jumped into fire to kill a child to be treated differently? It is symbolic that someone with evil intentions would meet their end. It's the same way. Hinduism is isolated to interpret these events as patriarchal or evil. But this is misinterpreted beyond recognition, overturning the evil event and then holding Hindus as evil. Sacred texts of Hinduism, the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, are interpreted with racial overtones. What is happening now is othering of Hindus using such misinterpreted tales of festivals, gods, and goddesses. Symbolic representations of evil or demons are identified with groups of modern society, even though no such connections are seen in original texts or practice. For example, the festival of Holi is interpreted this way on the college campuses in the recent past. Anyone opposing these misinterpretations or out of context generalizations is name called or termed Hindutva. The issue is not with the academic research, but how it is weaponized outside of the academia, out of context to discount practitioners' perspectives. Appallingly, misinterpretations still continue to dominate public perceptions of Hinduism. Calling Hinduism and Hindu festivals as oppressive lacks ground reality as well as context. Therefore, the larger issue with academia in the West is twofold. First, denial of Hinduphobia, and the second, continually propping up the false narratives based on invader versus indigenous perspective, while denying the native practitioners' perspectives, thus ignoring pluralism of practices within Hinduism. I will examine these points below. Partisan interpretations of Hinduism and muted subjects. I will examine this first, and then we'll continue with the others. History of Hinduism has a complicated history in India. There is a peculiar way in which the Indian religion is discovered, presented, and written from the beginning, from the Western perspective. Hence, this only represents haphazard religion, haphazard understanding of Hinduism from the perspectives of the colonizer, not really from the perspectives of the practitioner. It is strange, but writing of history, history of religions in India had always been an international affair. Even the smallest of the religious issue in India can make international news and controversy. The Aryan invasion theory pervades every aspect of interpretation of Hinduism. Indian religion is constructed using artificial frameworks based on the new disproven theory of Aryan invasion and migration. I will briefly examine them here. Working with these artificial frameworks imposed from outside through imperial history constructions leads us nowhere. One cannot expect to raise a new building without changing the ground plan. What is happening in Indian history and religious studies for the past century is reconstructions based on the same frameworks the imperialist frameworks, which is like running on a treadmill but getting nowhere. Aryan invasion or migration theory is the greatest example of this imperialist category of imposition of stereotypes. Even though the recent genetic research has disproved any invasions, migrations from the steppes, some still continue to argue in support of Aryan migration. In this category of research, the most popularly used common words are lost language, lost population. However, they also began using recently ghost population to refer to such imaginary constructions, which lack factual support, internal textual support or internal archaeological support from Indian culture and history. I have previously discussed my views on lack of genetic evidence for Aryan migration elsewhere in my publications and lecture. Hence, I would not dwell too deep into it here. Historically, Indian subcontinent functioned as a unique geographical unit with numerous groups living with a mutually friendly and cooperating relations. Subject of Indian history and religion are studied as anything but multiple populations and multiple theories. Indigenous knowledge and understanding was never accepted as authentic. For example, the whole hoax of Aryan invasion is created this way. Even though no native memory or textual memory indicates any such thing, the researchers insisted that the invasions happened through voluminous works. Indian religion especially is twisted by applying unrelated theories. Linguistic theory was appropriated. Even though linguistic theory is not about races or not about invasions, it is stretched and applied to create race and regional divisions of history and peoples. Language is not race, that is for sure. But language spread for a variety of reasons. It is made part of the central framework of understanding Indian history and religions, which still is the case. Even simple and clear terms, uh, simple religious terms are debated until they lose their real value. I recently came across a discussion arguing that about a small word of the Pali Sutta. If the sutta came from Sanskrit sukta or sutra, which it was. Sutra is the Sanskrit word from which the Pali word sutta is derived. But they argue about it. But the question is not to find the true meaning, but to confuse the meaning. Even though it is known, popularly known among the people, popularly known among the practitioners, that is not the concern of the academics. The academics is, debate and discussion, even though it is a known word. So the simple word sutta is a large discussion, whether it is from sukta or sutra or, but it is known. Sukta gives rise to another word, suvutta in Pali. So this is just a small example of how each word is interpreted without any concern for ground reality or practitioner's perspective. Another popular word that is misinterpreted is the word bagha. Bagha is the root of Bhagavan. It is interpreted as Bhog or Bhoj, even though unrelated roots. Bhaga is the root of Bhagavan and known, but the knowledge of native understanding is disconnected. They try to propose it that Bhog or Bhoj might have given rise to the word Bhagwan, which is not true. Most of the classical stories of the epics are interpreted while changing this language. The main words are changed, main meanings are changed, and the epics are given a racist tone by using the Aryan invasion. So, for example, simple events are discussed, giving a different meaning, especially concerning gender. For example, the event of Bhishma's defeat with the help of Shikandi in the Mahabharata is interpreted as Arjuna hiding behind the grandmother, even though it was completely imaginary. Shikandi is not his grandmother. Um, and it's not mentioned in the text. It's not mentioned anywhere in the practice, but comes from the imagination. This imagination springs from the past life story of Shikandi, even though it had no connection to Arjuna as such. So another example of such speculative assumptions regarding gods also goes into questioning practice. For example, speculative assumptions regarding Jagannatha, Subhadra and Balabhadra are also written up, lots of volumes. Some scholars speculated that Subhadra in the Puri temple may have been Lakshmi, who had been later changed to Subhadra. How? We don't know. Practitioners don't know that. It's not written anywhere in indigenous texts or classical texts. However, imaginary constructed theories in the Western academia present that. Although there is no evidence, the goddess in Puri, Jagannatha temple, has been thought of as Lakshmi. She was never thought of as Lakshmi. She was always the sister Subhadra. And the goddess of Puri temple is specifically known as Subhadra and worshipped as such, which was established in historical research earlier through inscriptions and through examination of indigenous practices. And another category that is imposed on the gods, most of the gods, is pastoral gods. Pastoral gods is imposed on Krishna, and then later on other gods such as Khandoba, any popular god are goddesses. Goddesses are always called popular goddesses or village goddesses. And Lakshmi, even though she appears in the Rig Veda, is considered an indigenous goddess. And they say somehow this indigenous goddess is observed early and then incorporated into the Rig Veda. So lengthy works are written to argue epic personalities in India, such as Rama and Krishna, are the goddesses are somehow not what they were meant to be. This gets even more stranger with goddesses. They are called spouse goddesses, as if being unmarried makes them less respectable. Outrageous claims on goddess Durga, Mahishasura Mardini, under the disguise of research, might be familiar to most of you. Somebody even tried to associate Mahishasura with god Maiskoba. Many verbal gymnastics are employed to associate Mahishasura with some god or some theory of Aryan versus indigenous, so that the theory can be superimposed. It's not that they're trying to bring out true understanding. It's only that they're trying to impose the artificial theories of Aryan versus indigenous through these interpretations. Another point that is always used against Hindus is, and their practice is to eulogize non-Hindu rulers and obliterate Hindu rulers. This type of historical research dominates Indian history. Indian history constructions and religion go hand in hand. This eulogizing non-Hindu rulers is next only to the Aryan, non-Aryan theory. Most frequently, works are written eulogizing this ruler or that ruler. For example, Ashoka, Akbar, Aurangzeb, at the expense of other parallel historical events. So I have discussed the examples here. So in this broader light, there are two issues noted in the subject area of Hindu studies in the West. The academic study of Hinduism wields uncontrollable power and destructive behavior in its practices. Practitioner perspectives are somehow discounted as not valuable to understand the true Hinduism, even though a religion thrives on practitioners' beliefs and practices. Some academic work focuses on exclusively on disproving the practitioner perspectives, as well as denouncing their practices, thus denouncing the subject that they study closely, silencing the subject peoples while creating theories of understanding about them, about their practice, the Hinduism. The academia displays destructive behavior, if not entrenched superiority complex. This manifests in two ways, affecting the academia and outside perceptions of Hinduism. Primarily, this also leads to Hindu academics and Hindus to be held to a standard in which they are expected to deny their Hindu practices and become non-Hindus, which is not the case with practitioners of other religions. Practitioners' perspective is somehow seen as jaded, not as conducive to research. A religious practice is generally governed by long-held notions and received traditional wisdom. In this context, academic research matters little for the practitioner. However, in case of Hinduism, academic research and academic perspective impose themselves on the practitioners and try to silence their voices. Practitioner perspectives are actively discouraged as theoretical understanding developed in the academia dominate the public and policy discourse. However, since the academic perspectives are developed without clear consideration of practitioner perspectives, this could often lead to problems in public perceptions of Hinduism. While a religion thrives on the practice of its followers, in the case of Hinduism, it is being altered as academic theoreticians interject themselves within the tradition, declaring what is right or wrong practice, discounting the voices of practitioners at every step. The issue of Hinduphobia stems from this exceptional pressure placed on Hindus, not from inside the practice, but from outside the practice through imposing the academic perspectives. Under these imposed perspectives, simple practicing Hindus are depicted as fanatics and outliers by using less than respectable terms, coined terms, such as Hindutva. The problem with Hinduphobia in the West is that it stems from misrepresentations and half-truths concerning Hinduism. The goal of research should be to create knowledge and enlighten the public. But currently, the status quo of the research on Indian religions is doing the exact opposite of that, shattering knowledge by creating confusion. Each and every popular god of Hinduism is misrepresented by using this theory as pre-Aryan and process of Hinduization or Aryanization as being absorbed into Hindu religion. Even though Hindu religion and native religion is same, Hindu religion is the native religion of India. It was not brought by anybody, but theory proposes, and the theory shows that partial truth. Even those gods who appear in the Vedas are not spared this Aryanization label. Sri Lakshmi appears in the Rig Veda, but she is still considered a non-Aryan pre-Vedic goddess and somehow incorporated into the Rig Veda, the earliest scripture of Hinduism. Gods such as Krishna and Shiva are interpreted to be three or more. Krishna was considered as three gods, became into one god as many indigenous gods are observed. Shiva is also the same. Two Shivas are considered to have been there, one from Vedas, one from popular practice, and two Shivas become the popular practice of Shaivism. These interpretations are very common across Hindu studies. And the marriage of goddess becomes another tool how they interpret this. The marriage of goddess is celebrated in numerous temples across India, but it is interpreted as a process of Aryanization, either to bring the goddesses into Aryanization or the gods into Aryanization. So a simple temple ritual also becomes a tool for forwarding this theory. It is important that public discourse understand the religious belief of practitioners than interpretations of a few academics, which, as we discussed here, display imperialist misinterpretations and misrepresentations, interpreting Hinduism as bizarre and unworthy of respect, vilifying Hindu practices, festivals, and lifestyles, sometimes with false equivalencies, have become common across all spheres of the academia. This trend is especially concerning since this could lead to grave consequences for the practitioners due to misinterpretation put forward on numerous occasions. It is unfortunate that the very places of higher learning that are believed to foster knowledge and pluralism of thought are becoming venues of hate incidents against Hindus. I will focus now on the third point, how this misinterpretation and how the public representation is finally leading to a third aspect of Hinduism, leading to Hindu phobia. Hindus are asked to justify their faith with artificial constructions, Hindu versus Hindutva. Colonial societies often struggle with finding their true identity. For civilizations which were colonized and oppressed for a long time, civilizational trauma and this type of inherited history is true. It is important to take steps to bring forward truth and reconciliation. Unless the true understanding of history and religion of India is brought forward, reconciliation and healing of the society is hard to imagine. The civilizational trauma is multiplied by constant pressure on Hindus to prove themselves as worthy of respect. Indians or Hindus are always put under pressure to evaluate themselves and their culture from an outsider lens and outsider perspective. This puts undue pressure on every aspect of life of a Hindu. All these polemics on Hinduism has led to creating an artificial division, a dichotomy within the Hinduism without concern for practice. So this is Hindu versus Hindutva, or worse. There are also worse labels that are given. No other religion in this world is put under an artificial dichotomy like this. Not one theory is expected. Not one theory is proposed, such as Christianity versus Christianist or Muslim versus Islamist. This clearly proves the partisan focus of Hinduism. Scholars have focused Hindutva from Indian perspective in the works on Savarkar and Deen Dayal Upadhyaya, and the Hindutva paradigm is also extensively discussed. So I won't go into details on Hindutva and its interpretations, but I would only discuss, I would only point out how the misinterpretation, how the roots of Hinduphobia entrenched in academia brings forward this type of dichotomy, and then how it subjects Hindus to undue pressure and probably later on to undue attacks and worse. So we need to focus on three aspects. They need our attention to address this deeply entrenched, slanted understanding of Hinduism, which has led to Hinduphobia. Hinduphobia cannot be addressed by itself. It needs to be focusing on three aspects. The academic and theoretical constructions of Hinduism. We have to address these misinterpretations in the academic reconstructions of Hinduism, and we have to write them. and the public and media representations of Hinduism um, gradually will evolve once the academic constructions and theoretical perspectives are changed. And third, the direct and indirect attacks on Hinduism with the false dichotomy of Hindu versus Hindutva. It is simple Hindus, but the Hindus are pressured to evaluate themselves constantly to a colonialist supremacist understanding of Hinduism. There is only one Hinduism. There is no different practice or different theory. But asking Hindus to prove their worth always by using this dichotomy is unfair and puts undue pressure on Hindus, practicing Hindus. Therefore, this needs to be considered seriously. Um, I urge you to think deeply about how Hinduism is understood, whether the dichotomy is possible, or why this is happening, what the colonial understanding has done for Hindu studies in India, and require changes in these perspectives, because this is not what Hinduism is. This is not what India is. This is a misinterpreted understanding of India and Hinduism. Thank you very much.